In just a matter of hours, the 7-day ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is expected to come to an end, barring any last-minute extensions, after 8 more hostages were released today. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the region, meeting with leaders to discuss potentially extending the truce, as well as what comes next in Israel's military operation. Secretary Blinken says that in those meetings, he urged Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to take concrete steps to protect the lives of civilians in Gaza. The Biden administration's strategy regarding this conflict has been controversial, to say the least. The president's full-throated embrace of Netanyahu, the so-called bear hug, has earned him the ire of some in his own party. But at the same time, others are making a counter-argument that the strategy put him in the diplomatic position to make this temporary ceasefire and the hostage releases happen at all. Washington Post columnist Jennifer Rubin writes, if Biden had listened to demands from the left to condition aid to Israel, publicly condemn its war operations, and demand an immediate ceasefire, there is little chance any hostages would have been released or humanitarian aid increased. Biden understood 2 things his critics didn't. First, the U.S. has no power to order Israel around as if it were a vassal state. Israel will do what it must to survive, even without U.S. approval. It has conducted and will conduct military operations that its government considers essential to its national security. Second, any Israeli government, no matter how arrogant, must be concerned with Israeli public opinion. If the Israeli public trusts and embraces the U.S. president, it will be inclined to support his views on the region and his strategic thinking. Joining me now is Shadi Hamid, columnist and editorial board member for The Washington Post, and Daniel Levy, former Israeli peace negotiator and president of the U.S. Middle East Project. Thank you both for being here. I'm excited to talk with both of you. I want to ask you both to sort of comment, and I'm going to start with you, Daniel Levy, on whether you agree with the premise of Ms. Rubin's argument.
I do not. First of all, I think had the president, the administration, done many of those things, we probably wouldn't be here in the first place. But secondly, I do believe America has those levers, and we're going to eventually have to see America leaning in and using some of those levers if we're not going to add to the horrendous death toll, destruction that we're seeing in Gaza. But I would also say the following. Even if that is not the case, Israel should not be pursuing this mission with additional American weapons, additional American assistance, additional American diplomatic and political cover. At least throw that into the mix and see how it plays out in Israel. And at least then not be culpable yourself. You wouldn't be bleeding your international credibility, bleeding domestic support. And I imagine there would just be less bleeding, full stop, if America changed that position. I think she's got it fundamentally wrong.
Shadi, I'll go to you on the same question, because the sort of fundamental argument here is that Israel's sort of sense of siege, the sense that the world is against us, we're all we've got. If the Americans aren't with us, well, to hell with them as well. We're going to protect our people. And after 10/7 happened, they were going to do this anyway. They were going to bomb the living hell out of Gaza, and really there was nothing that could stop it. But that Biden, because he did the full bear hug, is now more popular in the Israeli street than Netanyahu is at this point, who was not doing much to get the hostages out, and that it's his leverage that he gained that actually got us to the ceasefire, this temporary ceasefire and the hostage releases we have now. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so I disagree with that assessment. I think the bear hug strategy has failed. Israel has not minimized civilian casualties. And even if you look at Blinken's comments in Israel, he's saying that Israel needs to have a clear plan to put a premium on protecting civilians. If you read between the lines, the implication is clear. He's suggesting that Israel has not put a premium on civilian protection up until now. And publicly, Biden officials have been careful about how they phrase these things. So they're saying the quiet part quietly. Some of their private remarks have been more pointed. But I think the basic thing here is that without any sense of consequences for what Israel does, why should Israel listen to what Blinken or anyone else is saying? And this is where I think the whole debate around conditions on military assistance becomes important. At the end of the day, the U.S. is the senior partner in this relationship with Israel. Israel is dependent on the U.S. Let's use our leverage, because if we don't use it now, when will we use it? And the civilian toll has just been so staggering, as we all know, with more than 2/3 of the Gazan population displaced. So clearly, Israel has not been particularly precise in its targeting. Clearly, Israel has not taken care to protect civilians, as Blinken said. So I think now's the time to have a serious conversation about what's next. And it's worth noting that Biden, a few days ago, when he was asked about putting conditions on aid to Israel, he said it's, quote unquote, a worthwhile thought. So something is shifting, and I think there's a growing realization that sometimes you got to put pressure on your allies. It doesn't mean that Israel doesn't have a right to defend itself. Of course, Israel has a right to defend itself, but how it defends itself is absolutely crucial right now.
I don't know if we have time to play it, but I do have the actual comments. Let's play it very quickly. This is what Mr. Blinken, Secretary Blinken, said.
I made clear that before Israel resumes major military operations, it must put in place humanitarian civilian protection plans that minimize further casualties of innocent Palestinians. That means taking more effective steps to protect the lives of civilians, including by clearly and precisely designating areas and places in southern and central Gaza where they can be safe and out of the line of fire. It means avoiding further significant displacement of civilians inside of Gaza. It means avoiding damage to life-critical infrastructure, like hospitals, like power stations, like water facilities.
Daniel Levy, is that still possible at this stage if this bombing continues?
Well, the very simple answer is no, because if the bombing continues and is resumed, then given the scale of the humanitarian crisis already in place, and look at what Dr. Tedros from the World Health Organization said today, the absence of sanitary conditions, potable water, the spread of disease. So if the bombing resumes, you won't be able to bring in what's needed, and that humanitarian problem, in addition to people being directly killed by the bombings, is going to metastasize. But secondly, I think it's just disingenuous to imagine that the way a military operation has proceeded thus far will radically change, given everything the Israelis themselves are saying. I would recommend a piece in the 972 website, which is an investigation inside Israel's calculated bombing of Gaza. So my fear is that it will go back to the massive destruction. Then eventually the administration will decide, okay, we have to lean in more. In those intervening period of time, we will have yet more casualties, and it's going to take time to walk Israel down from that. That should have begun long ago. It should have begun, if not then today. And Israel is still going to play in what I call this margin of malevolent maneuver. And Blinken and the administration should do their maximum to bring that to an end ASAP. And we've waited too long. And I fear that the two elements in play here, which is the internal pressure inside Israel from the families, which now will increase, I believe, has to be matched by the kind of external pressure, which means a sustained public disagreement probably by the administration.
I wish we had more time. We're going to have to bring you gentlemen back. We are one of our two favorite pairings, our favorite pairings to bring back, but we're going to have this conversation ongoing. Shadi Hamid, Daniel Levy, thank you both very much.